today we are going to be talking about what is the ATS. So the ATS, why am I already blanking? We're going to be talking about it today. So that is the automatic tracking system that employers typically use when you are applying for roles. How to create an ATS friendly resume. And then what does it look like expanding your application outside of the ATS, and how do you make sure that your application is getting through? Hopefully, after this session, you will be able to explain what the applicant tracking system is, how to optimize your resume for recruiters and for the ATS systems, how to tailor your resume for those job descriptions and for those keywords, and hopefully, you can identify some strategies to be able to network and hopefully get your application to that recruiter and put yourself up just a little bit. Higher as if you weren't networking or weren't having those connections. So hopefully that's what you leave with today based on what we're going to talk about. Okay, so I want you to imagine, right? You are applying for roles, you hit submit, and then what happens next? So thinking through, if you were the company side, right? The employer side, the recruiter side, what happens to your application after? And it may be something you've never thought of before, or maybe something that you've just assumed, right? So, but I want you to think through that for a second and kind of reflect. If I was a recruiter or if I was a hiring person, where do I think the application would go, or where do I think it would go? So there's a lot of different answers for this question, and it really depends on the employer. It depends on the type of employer, how big their company is, how large their HR department is. So that can really vary, but typically what we would see is you submit your application and then it's going to go in some type of applicant tracking system. It could be automated, it could be a Excel sheet. It could be in some type of system that they're going to be using to track the applicant. Basically, what it says. From there, it might go to a recruiter. It might go to an HR rep, somebody that's kind of screening it, right? This might be somebody whose side, their role is not HR, but they're having to do some HR duties, right? But it's going to be a person who is actively kind of reviewing, making sure that they're coming in and looking them over before they then send them to the hiring manager who is hiring for that role, who is maybe the supervisor, who's going to oversee it, who is the decision maker within that role. That's usually going to be the next step. Then from there, you might have an interview, a couple of interviews, depending on the process. And then once you interview, then you're going to have an offer. Now, this is not a perfect diagram, right, of after you submit what it will go through, but it's kind of your most general one, what we see the most common. And so when it goes through this funnel, a lot of times we think, oh, that applicant tracking system is the thing that kicks me out, right? It's the thing that's going to stop me from seeing the human in the recruiting. However, that's not always the case. There's a lot of different reasons why employers use applicant tracking systems, along with screening of resumes and screening those keywords to see if you are qualified for the role. So let's talk a little bit about that and what we think could be true or false. If you are up for it, I'd love to see if it's true, maybe a thumbs up in the chat, or if it's false, maybe a thumbs down, based on how you're feeling about some of these sentences. Okay, ATS automatically rejects 75% of resumes. Do we feel like that is good, bad? You could just react in the Zoom. You don't have to put it in the chat. Do we think it's true, false? Okay, got a true. Thinking, yeah, it's definitely okay. Okay, so we got a couple of truths. So this is actually false. This is false. So it's not automatically rejecting. It might be screening in into a maybe, yes, no, maybe pile, but it's not automatically rejecting, which is a lot of times how we feel like an ATS system is going to do. But it's not, right? It might go into another pile, but typically, even for the resumes, it's going to screen your resume and it's going to give a lot of times a percentage of saying this person is 60% qualified based on these things, but it's not automatically rejecting. There are some that can set up, but I wouldn't say 75% of them. Fancy resume templates help you stand out. What do we think? True, false? Okay, awesome. We got some thumbs down. That is false. Fancy resume templates don't help you stand out. We're going to learn a little bit more about formatting, but it doesn't really, that's not quite the case, right? We want them to be professional looking. Templates, and the more fancier and the complicated they get, sometimes it just takes away from your bullet points and it doesn't always translate over. So we want them to look professional, but fancy is not always what we want. Humans still review many applications, so we think yes, no, they're not really reviewing them, they're just going through the ATS. Okay, yeah. All right, this was kind of giveaway. Definitely, they're still reviewing many of your applications. Um, Either one, they're going to go through that automated applicant tracking system at first, kind of do that resume scanner, and then they're going to go to a human, or they may automatically just go to a human. I actually know a lot of employers that turn off the resume screener. White text keywords are a good trick. Now, this is kind of an older trick. I don't know if a lot of people know about this anymore, but I was curious. Do you think it still works? Have you heard about it? True or false? Okay, not many answers right now, which it's okay. So this is actually false. The trick that was like kind of like a wise tale with the ATS systems is if you take the certain keywords or the job description and you put it in white text on your resume, the employer won't see it, but then the ATS and the like resume scanner will pick up the keywords and say that you're qualified because you have all these keywords. That's not quite true, but it was kind of a myth. So you should submit the exact same resume to every job, true or false? False, you are right. You should not be. And this is kind of what we're here to talk about today. Tailoring it, making sure it is good for the application and fits each application. You don't want to do that, right? Because you're going to be applying for many jobs. And even if the role has the exact same title, a lot of times they might still be looking for different things. All right, once you hit submit, my work's done. I'm all good. Is this true or false? Okay, false. Great job. So once you hit submit, in the general view, yeah, maybe your work is done with the application, but you're not done there, right? You've got things that you're going to follow up on. Maybe you need to research for an interview, things like that. So your not work is not done, and we're going to talk a little bit more. So overall, you guys are definitely doing well and have some good ideas, but let's get a little bit more into it. So what do employers use applicant tracking systems for? A lot of different things that are not just the resume scanning. One, job postings. That is how they advertise their jobs. That's how they keep them organized. Same with applications. That's how they collect applications, they organize them. Candidate information. You ever thought, oh, there are hundreds and hundreds of applicants applying for one job. How are they keeping track? This is what they're using it for. They use it for communications. A lot of times they have some type of communication or note system within applications where they can talk to their other team members, maybe even tag someone to say, hey, look at this application. Anything like that that can happen within the team, anything to do with like recruitment communication. Resume parsing, so that's kind of what a lot of people know and assume all applicant tracking systems are for, that they automatically pull out relevant information from resumes and help the employer decide if someone is qualified or not. Again, like I said, not every employer has this option even turned on. But that is an option that an applicant tracking system can use. Automated emails. So I'm sure if anyone has applied to a job, you've received some type of formalized email that says like do not respond or something like that, and it's along the lines of you've been selected for an interview, or the unfortunate one of you've not been selected, right? It seems very formal. A lot of times those are sent to applicant tracking systems because all of your candidate information and all of the applications are stored and tracked and organized in that system. And so there's a way that they can just pull out those emails and send it directly to anyone who's applied for that job. They also do interview scheduling depending on the employer. And then a lot of times they use it for data. So analytics of tracking, this application got 100 applicants, but this one only got 50. What are the differences? What are we looking for? So as much as like you are also interested in your field, HR is also a field that they want the analytics for and the data. And so an applicant tracking systems helps keep that organized. So hopefully this helps you get an idea of what an ATS system really is and what it is used for. In the grand scheme of things, it really is just a kind of like a CRM or some type of system that is tracking your applications and tracking who is applying for what role and what roles are out there within a company. Some companies, especially large ones, think Amazon, Raymond James, any of those super large ones, they have to have this, right? They have hundreds of jobs opening, every month, maybe, every day, depending on the company, and hundreds of applicants applying every day. So they have to have some type of system that is going to keep it organized. And so it's not always just that resume parsing and the resume scanning. All right, so now that you kind of know what it is, what exactly do I need to do to make sure that my resume is going to fit into that ATS and be friendly with it, right? So say the company is using a resume parsing. It could be for the extensive use of, I'm going to go through this and actually give the employer a score on the resume, or maybe it just might be, I'm going to scan through it to give you the information later on. It's not always based on qualifications, but we want to make sure that the ATS is actually able to read your resume. So this QR code is going to take you to our website with a sample resume at the bottom. So I'll show you that in a minute, but just wanted to put that out there in case you wanted to see what a sample resume could look like. So let's think about some things that you want to do. Within your resume, you want standard, clear headings, easy to read, easy to find, and you don't want them to be so crazy, like very simple ones like education, my experience, involvement, volunteerism, right? We don't want to get too like abstract with our titles because it might be hard for the ATS system to recognize what that actually means or for the employer to find them. We want simple fonts that are easy to read and easy to pick up. Consistent formatting. So this is really key. If you're going to use one font for a heading, make sure to use that same font for all headings. If you're going to underline a heading, make sure you underline all headings. If you're putting your date in a certain spot for one job, it should go into the same spot for your next job. So making sure it's consistent formatting so it's easy to find and read. Making sure you're using keywords, which we will go into more in depth in a little bit. For your resume, you should have a professional file name. You would be so surprised at the amount of names and file names that we see when applying to jobs that are just a little like, what was going through their head when they saved this file? So really look at that. Usually I recommend some type of first name, last name, maybe a year attached to it. For me, when I'm applying, or what I recommend is as I'm editing it, I might name it, right, the job or something like that to keep organized. But then right before I submit it and I convert it to like a PDF format, I rename it, Snipes Taylor 2026, or sometimes I do like a my first initial last name, because you get right eventually you get a lot of resumes and cover letters. So using some type of format with your first name, last name, maybe your middle initial, so that way it looks very professional. And then when they're going through their applicant tracking system, they can easily see, oh, this file is named Snipes T. This clearly goes with this person. And then make sure to save it as a PDF unless they request otherwise. So I have seen a couple employers request a Word document or something specific, right? Obviously follow instructions based on the application, but if there are no instructions, automatically just assume to do PDF. That way your file is saved and the formatting of your resume doesn't change. Now let's get into some don'ts. So things you want to avoid, grammatical errors. Obviously, in the resumes they have so much information and it can be very easy to have some type of misspelling or grammatical error, but try to avoid it as much possible. Have friends, family look it over just for like grammatical errors. Just because you are writing a lot of information, it's easy to miss. But that's a simple thing of an employer saying, oh, they have a grammatical error on a document that's supposed to be really important. They may assume like, oh, they may not have, they aren't good at small details or something like that. So trying to have as few errors as possible. 2-column resumes, we want to really avoid that. So that is when there are 2 columns on the pages, is because what happens is essentially a lot of times the ATS systems, they read from left to right. And so if there are 2 columns, it's going to read from left to right, which will not make sense because it will go from 1 column to 2 column and it just won't make sense. So you want to try to avoid that. You want to avoid a lot of blank space. This is not great because it can cue the employer of saying, you know what, they have a lot of blank space. They must be missing some key qualifications, experience, responsibility, things like that. So we want to try to avoid having a resume that is like half a page empty. Photos and graphs, any type of graphics, graphs, charts, we want to also try to avoid those. They aren't typically ATS friendly. It can't really pick up the graphics. We also want to avoid any type of photos of ourselves just because we don't know if the employer has any type of biases towards, maybe they have somebody they don't really like that we remind them of, right? We want to avoid any type of biases. So photos, graphs, anything like that, we want to try to avoid. Putting it in text is the best case scenario. Everything bolded and underlined. We also want to avoid this because it can be really hard to read, right? If we bold everything and we emphasize everything, then what is not important, right? It just gets tricky to read and not easy for employers to find. So we really only want to bold and underline our key headers, our name, dates, things like that. And then copy and paste the job description. So today we're going to talk eventually about some ways that you can tailor your resume to fit the job description. So that way the like resume reviewing and the applicant tracking system can pick up your resume. But you really want to avoid actually copying and pasting the job description or, directly using those bullet points from a job description on your resume. Okay, so really quickly, I want to show you this QR code. If you haven't scanned it already, is on our website. Here, you'll go to the section resumes and CVs on our website, and at the bottom, you'll find some resumes and CV examples. So let's just click on our general resume. And you'll see here, this is our general resume. So right off the bat, you only see one thing saying it's spelled wrong, quote unquote. That's really because it's a company, something like that. But either one would be fine. But you want to obviously avoid grammatical errors. This is a 1-column resume. So it goes straight from left to right. There's no column separating the middle, so it's easy to read. They only bold the most important headers and jobs. And then, yes, it's using the full page. It's clean. It's easy to read. It would be easy for an automated tracking system to read. So this is just one example of a resume. Yours can look a little bit different, but this is ideally a similar format that we would want: professional, clean, and simple. Okay. All right, so now the secret to a resume review, and the ATS system is tailoring your resume. And you clearly all know this because you gave me a thumbs up, thumbs down earlier, depending on, I can't remember the question, but right. So you already know this. So how do we do that? One, we review and annotate the job description. When you're actively applying, you look at the job description, you think, okay, what are they hoping for? What are they asking for? What am I going to be doing? All of these things, and you're going to annotate and take notes on what exactly the employer is saying you'll be doing in this job and what they're asking for. You then might want to analyze the company website, right? So if the employer is excited about innovation and they're saying that their mission is to contribute to marine life and advance of technology for marine science, right? If you've done a job like that, you might want to use similar language to the company in the job description. You want to then compare your own skills and your own coursework and experiences to those things. So, like I said, okay, you notice, oh, in the job description, they ask that this person is a good public speaker. Well, maybe you didn't actually do the job you're applying for, but when you worked at Tampa Bay Watch, you led classes for people who came to visit, and you had to, be a public speaker, right? So that's when you're going to start to think about, oh, well, I've actually never done a job that was in public speaking, but I did take this one class where I had to do this project and I had to speak to a class, or I had to do X, Y, and Z. And they start thinking through where do they overlap in what they're asking for and what have I done. And then you want to try to use action verbs and data to really build out your bullet points to really explain how it matches what they're asking for. Now, bullet points are not the only thing you can tailor your resume to showcase your job description and your knowledge of the role. These are some different areas. One, your summary, also sometimes called an objective or a professional summary. This is that very top of your resume where you kind of explain who you are. This section is optional. A lot of times I recommend this section for students who, one, don't have a ton of experience and they're trying to explain to the employer why they're interested in this field and the skills they have that can contribute to the role. Or if maybe you have a major or you have experience in a field that is not the same to the job that you're applying for. So, for example, maybe you majored in English and you're going into a sales role, right? That's not automatically an easy transition sometimes for an employer to see on your resume. And so, if you have a summary or an objective, you can kind of tailor it to your skill set and explain how your degree in English might be a good, role in sales and how it could contribute, what skills you have that can contribute to that role. Talking about skills, your skill section. This should definitely be tailored to your job, even if the job is at the same company, right? Every single job requires something different, and so you should be tailoring your skills based on the company and the job description. Same with bullet points. Obviously, we kind of talked about bullet points and we'll go more into it in a second. But those should definitely be tailored and using the same language as the company and the job description. Your coursework. So if obviously, your degree doesn't change when you leave here, but how you tell the employer about your degree could change. So if you are applying for a role that is asking for research and data analysis, you might pull specific classes, where if you're applying for a role that's more on, the animal care side or husbandry or something like that, you might pull a different set of classes. So really tailoring your class list and your coursework or your projects to the employer and what they're asking for is going to be ideal. Same with your certifications. That's kind of explanatory, right? We want a lot of our certifications on there because a certification is a certification. But if you're applying for a specific job, you might want to put it a little bit higher, or you might want to make sure it's on there if that is tied and related to the job that you are applying for. Okay. Also, I just want to reiterate, I know this is a lot of information, so if you have any questions at any point, please feel free to put them in the chat and stop me. I'm happy to answer any questions. I'll also give some time at the end as well. Okay, so now let's practice. So I want to kind of walk through what this looks like and what annotating a job description looks like from my perspective and how I would recommend a student do it and how even I do it when I job search. So I went ahead and linked Zoo Tampa, and we're going to go down and look at some of the jobs that they have online. I'm just going to pick this internship job, right? So we see their job description, we see what they're asking for. The first thing I do when I see a job that I am actively applying for and interested in is I download it. So I'll go here, I'll hit save as PDF, and then I will save it on my desktop. This allows me, once it's saved, I can make sure that if I am asked to come interview, a lot of times once we apply and the job closes, this description is gone, which does not help us in preparing our interview or sending follow-up emails or anything like that. And so I always make sure all my job descriptions are saved on my computer, so that way if I am invited to an interview, I can say, oh, I remember exactly what this job description is. I can go and review it and it can help me prepare. The other reason I download it is because then I can go on here and I can take some notes of saying, okay, I'm going to go through this job description. Here it is, everything that they're asking for, and I'm going to go through and highlight key areas. So one, this is what the job is. Spots are limited. They don't actually have a deadline, so that's key to know because I clearly must need to apply pretty quickly because spots are limited and they don't have a deadline, so you just don't really know when it's going to close. This other piece is important. Don't apply to 2 or more internships. Okay, that's really important because if you didn't see that, it's going to result in disqualification, and that's important. So what I would do then is keep going and say, okay, what exactly am I looking for? Okay, it's not marine mammal training. It is rehabilitation and looking at wild manatees. Okay, so if I'm looking for mammal training, this is not the role for me. But then I'm going to keep going. Okay, they're asking for these things. Let's see. There's going to be an online course, so maybe I'm going to talk about that in my cover letter. They have the opportunity to learn about some of these things. So this is really important to know. Then I'll go down here and I'm saying, okay, I'm going to have to care for animals. I'm going to have to do a lot of observation, some record keeping, interacting with the public, definitely educating the public, a positive guest relations, public speaking skills. All right, we're going to keep going. Excellent communications, customer relations, desire to work with animals and guests. And then essentially I do this for the whole thing and see, okay, what exactly am I seeing over and over again? Automatically, just in this half, I see communication a ton, working with animals a ton, being, organized, observing, record keeping, customer service. Those are the things that I'm seeing automatically over and over and over again. So then when I think, okay, what experiences do I have? Well, I don't have any experience working with animals, but I do have experience working with people, working in customer service, doing presentations, presenting in class. Like, these are all the things that they are asking for, and I should be making sure it's on my resume. And not just in any way, but actually using some of the language that they use. So, for example, positive guest relations, right? Guest relations is different than customer service or problem solving. And so thinking about some of the language that they use and making sure that I'm using similar language in my own resume. Okay, so that's just an example of how I pull a job description, how I annotate it. That was very quick, but I just want to give you an idea of what that really entails and what that actually looks like. Once we have that information, we then go to writing our bullet points. So when you're writing your bullet points, you really want to focus on 3 key aspects. An action verb. So what did you do? What was your skill? An example of how you did that skill, and then the result of what type of impact did you make by using this skill, and if you can quantify it if possible. So, for example, if we're thinking about the job description that we just saw, so Zoo Tampa, a lot of the things it said was like communication, guest relations, customer service, things like that. Those are some of the action verbs I want to be thinking about, or some of the skill set I want to be thinking about. Well, maybe you worked at a restaurant, so you're thinking, oh, well, I had to communicate with guests, I had to communicate with customers, I had to make sure that they were comfortable, they felt welcomed. What did I do? I worked with them. How many customers? Maybe that's the quantifying of thinking, oh, well, I interacted with like 100 customers a day. Automatically already have your bullet points, right? So I communicated with customers by making sure they were happy and that they, had any of the problems that they had, that they were solved. And I did that by doing that, I made them make sure it was a welcoming environment, that they were satisfied, right? So automatically I've created a bullet point, just simple, right? The language could be improved, but I'm already thinking about that bullet point just from knowing what I did and what the employer wants based on that job. And now, don't forget, go check out our website. We have lots of resources on creating your bullet points, but that's just a reminder. And then here is an example of what my bullet point could look like. This is a pretty complex one, but thinking about provided excellent customer service. So that might be the result. It doesn't have to be in this perfect format, but the result is I provided excellent customer service. What I did was assisted 50 guests per shift, answering questions, resolving concerns, and creating a welcoming environment. And what were my skills through communication and professionalism? Already, we know, this could be tweaked if I go back to our job description and I think, oh, actually, they said that they wanted a positive, I can't remember where it was, but that they wanted a positive customer service. So like, okay, maybe, oh, there we go, positive guest relations. Maybe I change my language to that instead, or something. So really thinking through what that looks like, and what your bullet point might entail based on the job description. But overall, right, you've hit the points needed, that they're asking for, and then also you're showcasing what you did. All right. Now that we have our application, you've got your resume, maybe you've done a cover letter, you're filling out your application, but what is beyond the resume, right? What else can you do? Now, if you've attended our last webinar that was around this time with me, you might have heard some of this information before, but the biggest thing is leveraging your network. You cannot, I wouldn't even know how to explain when an ATS system comes, when an ATS is in front of an employer, if you have a referral or if you have someone who is vouching for you that tells the employer, a lot of times in your application it'll ask, like, do you know anyone who works here or who could refer you? If you have that, sometimes it will like highlight your name yellow, it will put you in a different category, it will showcase how many referrals. It really depends on the employer's ATS, but it really does highlight your application. And so having those referrals and using your network will really help you stand out. So a couple of ways that you can utilize your network and identify who's in your network is one, Triton Track's career contacts. So on Triton Tracks, we have a section of employers, of alumni who have said that they are willing to help you out if you reach out to them, find their LinkedIn, and are willing to communicate and work with students. We also have the alumni student connection, so you can sign up to have like an alumni mentor and through the alumni office. So definitely recommend checking that out through LinkedIn, obviously. And one thing I would definitely recommend is utilizing, let's see if this takes, oh, it didn't work. That's okay. So when you are on LinkedIn and you go to Eckerd as a page, so let's log in real quick. We'll log into mine. If you go to Eckerd, they have an alumni section right here that you can actually search for different alumni based on where they work, where they live, what they studied, what they do. And so you can filter through this and say, you know what, I am also in environmental studies. I want to see who else there. And you can actually go through different people based on where they studied, where they live, and you can reach out to them and say, hey, I see that you worked at Tampa Bay Watch, and I really want to work there. Would you be willing to make a connection or referral, or at least provide some insight into the company, right? Or insight into the application process. So utilizing your connections there, your alumni connections, going to career fairs, employer events. We have employers on campus all the time, so making sure to utilize those connections. Maybe you do an informational interview and you get some more information. This is kind of what I was saying, is like informational interviews not only are helpful for you in that you're learning more about the job and the role, but you're also learning about, you could be asking about the application process. I've done that before. I went and talked to someone who used to have the role and said, help walk me through this. I want to be prepared and I want to make sure that I know what I need to know. And so an informational interview could even look like that. You can also network with professional associations, and I would definitely recommend following up with employers and key partners after events, because say you meet Raymond James at an event here, right? Or maybe Tampa Bay Watch, will stick with them, right? And you connect with them on LinkedIn after, but you never follow up, right? When they get your application, more than likely they may or may not remember the actual event. However, what they might remember is seeing your name in their notifications on LinkedIn, or seeing your name pop up as you post, or maybe you're liking things. And so then they're like, wait, I actually don't remember who Taylor is, but Taylor Snipes, that name really sounds familiar. And then they can, they may not remember that you're from LinkedIn, or that you connected at this event, but your name at least sounds familiar and you're moving that much higher up on their status of who they're reviewing. Okay, so that's just a few ways of identifying who your network is. You can really leverage them in this application process. Now, when you apply, it's not just that one and done like I talked about earlier, and all of you agreed. It's not applying and then you're done. There's also ways that you can help increase your chances when it comes to applications. So one, like we just talked about, is getting a referral and reaching out to people. So this is just one kind of context of what a template could look like. If you are reaching out to someone, maybe a fellow Akron alumni, who actively works at a company, or maybe who did work at a company, and seeing if they'd be willing to refer you, or maybe meet up with you for coffee or something like that. So this is just like some ideas for how that wording might go. Sometimes it's not always fun to cold email someone, so I wanted to provide some context of what that could look like. Then once you apply for a role, it's not just I'm going to sit and wait, right? We have to actively be engaged in the application process throughout the whole thing, and that involves following up with employers. And so I would recommend 2 to 3 weeks after you apply. If you don't hear anything, let's go ahead and follow up with them. Find their email. Maybe it's a general HR email, something like that, but really emailing them, and this is what that could look like, to let them know, hey, I applied. I'm really interested. I haven't heard anything. I just want to follow up. This is why I think I'm really good and would be a great fit for the role. So this might be what that communication might look like. Okay, so now I want you to think through just a quick checklist, or maybe keep this in your notes of things that, what do I need to be doing before I hit submit? I want to make sure my resume is tailored, or maybe your cover letter is tailored. You want to use keywords that feel natural. This is the really biggest thing. Natural is key, because especially now that we have AI, and a lot of, honestly, just AI in general, it keeps, and I guess resumes too, there is a form of like extreme professionalism that just is not natural for college students and graduates. Even me, who's been out of college for years, right? I just don't talk like that. And so you want to have this fine line of it being professional and fitting the norms of a resume without making it feel like, oh, this is a word they would never use and I know they can't use it, right? So it's clearly AI, or maybe it just doesn't feel natural. And so really making sure your keywords fit and feel good, and also don't exaggerate what you actually did, right? It should actually be accurate to the work that you did. No spelling errors, making sure you have the correct file format, it's a professional name, and that you complete every application field. This is really important on your actual application. So outside of the resume, when you're filling out their application, you want to make sure that you're answering every question, but also answering every question accurately. One thing I noticed with ATS systems, specifically ones that start to parse out in applicants, is they might ask a question. So say you see on the job description that it says um, applicant must have 2 to 5 years of experience in customer service, right? That's on the job description. And then you go to apply and it literally asks you, do you have 2 to 5 years of customer service experience? I'm not going to say 100% of the time, but a lot of the time, that is a parsing out question. That's where they're trying to see who is actively a screening question of who is qualified and who is not. So really think through that, right? For me, if I have customer service experience, maybe I don't in the nature of thinking, do I have customer service experience? Well, I've never worked at a restaurant. I mean, I have, but like, if, for example, maybe I haven't worked at a restaurant and maybe I haven't worked at a hospitality place, and maybe I haven't worked at a retail store, so I feel like I don't have customer service experience. But hold up, I did do an internship at an elementary school. And at that elementary school, I had to work with parents and I had to email and I had to do parent teacher conferences, and that is customer service, right? So, really thinking through your skill set before you say, no, I don't have 2 to 5 years, right? We don't want you to lie, but really thinking through, do I actually have the skill set? Because it's very quick to screen you through, you know, help they said no, so they're not getting to an actual recruiter. So really reading those questions and making sure you're filling out everyone to the best of your ability. Um, Making sure you have an updated LinkedIn. If you were applying for a job and you know, says that you did X, Y, and Z, but on your resume it says you did something a little different, or that you know, your LinkedIn says that you've been working at Chick-fil-A for 10 years, but your resume says you only worked there for 2 years and you just forgot to, change that on your LinkedIn. Like, make sure that's updated. And then reach out to your connections if possible. So that's really the last step of saying, okay, I see this job. I'm going to go through the alumni tab on LinkedIn for Eckerd. I see, John works at this company. I'm going to just go for it, right? Might as well take the shot and just see what they say. It can't hurt. I wouldn't always wait. So if they don't respond to you, I wouldn't always wait to apply for your connection. You can still just apply and then send them an email if like you feel like you're on it's getting crunch time with the application and it might be due. So you don't have to wait, but you can kind of do either one. So it really is up to your time frame, what you're asking for, things like that. Okay, so that is just some things to hit before you submit. This is our website here with some resources for Life After Eckerd. So it has some information on how to stay organized. I really love, again, if you were at our last thing, you saw that you if you were at our last webinar, you saw I also talked a lot about this. But if you go to Life After Eckerd and then searching for a job, at the very bottom, we have a job and intern search activities tracker. I really like this because as you start applying for jobs, you need to track when you're applying, who did you reach out to for that job, when did you apply, when do you need to follow up. And so this just helps with keeping that organized so you know when and where and all the good stuff to make sure that you are staying organized and up to date on that application. Okay. And then, so if you forget absolutely everything from this presentation, which hope you don't, but it's a lot of information, so I get it. It's recorded just in case. What I don't want you to forget is your resume needs to be readable. So make it readable. Make it relatable. You want to make sure that it feels connected to the job and the work that the employer that you are applying for is doing, and to make it personable. You want to make it feel like you are, you know, everyone who works at that company. You have connections here. You've done this. It's related to this. You want to make it feel like this is the perfect job for you and that you are the perfect fit because you've done so many things that are tied to the skills that are needed for this role, and you have connections in that field. Alrighty. Now, some time for questions, and this is also who is in the team here at the Career Center. So we have Dwayne, Maddie, myself, and Angelina. So we all help students at any different phase. The QR codes take you to our LinkedIn, so definitely connect with us on LinkedIn. If anything, myself, I'm newer to Eckerd and I just started in May, so I'm slowly kind of getting out there and making those connections myself on LinkedIn. So I love to connect with more students and faculty and staff here at Eckerd, but then also it's a great way to stay connected with our team because if we see any jobs that we think might be good for Eckerd students, we tend to like them, reshare them, repost them, things like that. So I definitely recommend staying connected or getting connected with us. Okay, I am going to leave some space for questions. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, but if you have any questions, feel free to put it in the chat, unmute, raise your hand, anything like that.